Do you want to start with like original predictions flowing
Yeah,
into
let's
that?
let's dive in. I figured we can talk about the East,
Yeah.
and start with Bucks Nets because we can talk about what our original prediction was, and then after watching Game One, what do we change if we change it at all? What do we change it to, and why? So I had originally had Bucks in seven,
Yep.
and I'm actually going to keep that prediction, even after watching Game One, and we'll get into the specifics of Game One. And obviously, the biggest question mark is like, what's going on with James Harden? 40 seconds into the game, pulls his hammy, the one that's already been aggravating him all season, leaves. Apparently, like left the arena to get an MRI too.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen any. I hadn't really been on Twitter today, so I didn't see if there was anything new on that. But that being said, and the fact that the Nets won, I'm still sticking with the Bucks in seven. I know that it wasn't a great game one for them, but I'm also going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, they had a week off. I think they needed to kind of get into the rhythm. It was a game in Brooklyn. I feel like home court advantage now is like even bigger deal than ever because the stadium was pretty much full as far as I can tell. Like it's no longer just like scattered crowds here. It's like it's a full crowd, and I think that the players feel that even more so now that like they feed off that energy. So I'm not too concerned about the Bucks losing, game one on the road. I think they'll get their stuff together. I have another point here too, but I'll kick it back. I'll kick it over to you if you want to kind of talk about your thoughts on the original prediction and if it
Yeah,
changes.
I like you like right before I was literally having a conversation about the game right before uh sending you that text, and I was like, I think I'm going Bucks in seven. Part of it is like I just want them to win, and it's fun to be predicting the team to win that you actually want to win.
Yep.
Part of it was that, but then the other part was like Brooklyn hasn't really been tested, and I think the chemistry thing is gonna show itself at some point in the series. And like seeing all the different teams, the Lakers are a perfect example of it. Like they beat Phoenix like with AD or like with AD basically and no LeBron. And I think LeBron's still more important to that team than AD will ever be like during the regular season. But then like AD goes out and you see them like they can't figure out matchups. They can't like they didn't know how to adjust because they didn't understand themselves as a team. And I
Yep.
think Milwaukee understands themselves as a team. So I initially had Bucks in seven. That was like my gut reaction. Watching the game, I tuned in like a little bit late,
Hmm.
like probably like 10 minutes into the quarter. Harden like had gone out in the first 40 seconds. And
Yep.
as I was watching, like I wasn't on Twitter at all when I was watching.
Right. You're just kind of like, why is
And I'm just like,
where's
nobody's
Harden?
talking about Harden. He's not here. What's going on?
Yeah,
And
you didn't
so,
see him on the bench, so you're like, okay, he's not just sitting, and you're like,
yeah.
it's been a while now, so what's going on? Yeah,
Yeah. And I was like halfway distracted, like being at the party and everything. I'm just like, okay, I guess he got hurt. He had to have gotten hurt. But watching the game, the thing that stuck out to me um, was that Milwaukee made no threes like whatsoever. They shot like
yeah,
six
they were
threes,
bricking, man.
and that's something that's not, I would think, not going to continue. Like you mentioned, they didn't
Agreed.
have a lot of rest, or they had too
They
much
had too
rest.
much. I
Yeah,
think they had too
too much
much rest,
rest.
honestly.
And then like I don't see Blake Griffin being that guy for 7 games of a series if it ends up going seven. So I'm also sticking with the Bucks, especially like if there's a either hobbled or like absent James Harden. Like
Yeah,
all those games at the end of the year where they were super close and Milwaukee won were no James Harden versus, and that was with no fans. So it'll be interesting. And I think ultimately, like Brooklyn's got home court, so they did what they were supposed to do one game
right. That's
one.
what I mean.
So
That was
game
kind of
two,
my point too. I'm like,
yeah,
there's no reason to panic if you're the Bucks. It's like
yeah,
the 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 Nets kept home court, and that was kind of expected. I'm glad you mentioned Blake Griffin because I had a point here too. Like this sounds kind of like a tangent, but gonna circle it back. Like some of my favorite players like of all time that never put on a Bulls jersey were like Ray Allen, Vince Carter, Grant Hill. These guys were like studs when they were in their prime, right? Like they were the guys on their team. And then think about how long their career was because they were able to kind of adapt to the play of the game and know that they're like don't have the same athleticism, whether it's through injuries or just through aging, but still find ways to become like role players on teams. I see that happening right now with a handful of people, like in this playoff specifically. You know, we saw it with D Rose in with the Knicks. Like that was pretty crazy. The fact that this guy, used to be MVP, used to be all about explosiveness, and then here he is in the playoffs with the Knicks, and like he was carrying them for some of these games. Like there were games where they lost, but he was like they kept them competitive because it was Derrick Rose on the court who was like doing floaters, making threes. Like he changed his game so much just to even like keep them competitive. And then the last year and this year, I feel like Carmelo Anthony, like another guy, like he was out of the league for a while. Like teams didn't even want to like mess with him, and then the Blazers took a chance on him, and he like found his role. It took him a little bit, obviously, like he wasn't just
Yeah.
right away contributing. And I feel like he did some good things in the bubble last year, and then this season too. Obviously, they got bounced in the first round, but I just feel like he kind of now has figured out what his role is. And I say that all to say like not that Blake Griffin's going to be like a huge X factor, and like you said, I don't think he's going to consistently be having 18 points, 14 rebounds every game, but he has that kind of mentality now. I think I think he's understanding that he's like, okay, I see who's on my team, I get it. I'm not going to be jumping out my shoes and like dunking it on everyone. He did have a dunk though, which was nice, but he's finding other ways. Like there were so many plays too. He was the guy on the ground.
He's the
He was the guy hustling. He was the guy bringing the energy. And I think that was a difference maker in yesterday's game, especially because, like you said, there was no Harden. And I know I'm kind of rambling, and I'm still sticking with Bucks winning this series. But going on the other side of it, there's almost like a counter argument to what we were just talking about with the Nets and their chemistry. I almost feel like it's almost a benefit that they haven't had all their pieces together because they kind of know how to shuffle. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah, yeah,
it was like in game one, it was like, okay, Harden's out, but we've been here before. It's not like we had Harden every single game of the season. Like they played plenty of games without James Harden. They kind of understand how to move the cards a little bit, like on the spot, where it's not like they were just like clueless. Like to your point with the Lakers, they're just kind of like, well, now what the heck do we do? I just feel like they had enough experience in the regular season of shuffling their lineups. There's a crazy stat of like how many different starting lineups
Yeah.
Steve Nash has put out there, and the number was absurd. I was like, are you kidding me? But like, in a way, I think that like prepares them to be like, oh yeah, we can just keep shuffling things around, and we'll figure it. These guys will figure it out.
Yeah, and just I feel like I'm talking myself into into the Brooklyn
Right.
thing,
So,
but at the same time, like another perk of that is like nobody's seen the lineups that they're throwing. Like nobody has gotten reps and has tape on the three of them really playing together. So
exactly.
it's going to be figuring out on the fly, like how to guard them, how to scheme for them. And there's no LeBron waiting at the other end with his computer brain to just like calculate how to stop you. And there's no team even. I'm getting all the way to the finals potentially, but like there's no team with bigs to like completely disrupt them. Like Gobert is Gobert.
Right.
We'll talk about the Jazz a little bit later.
Yeah.
So it's like it'll be interesting. I feel like this is either part one. This is either the finals or part one of the finals. Because
Yeah.
part two will probably be versus Philly if we get there.
Yeah, yeah. I think I side texted you about this, but just to put it in writing or say it out loud, like whoever wins this series, I think is not only going to the finals but gonna win it all. So like if we're both wrong and the Nets win it in 6 or 7, that's fine too. But I think that they're moving on from there. They're gonna take
Yeah.
the next series in the Eastern Conference, and I don't like you said, I don't see anyone in the West matching up to either of these teams.
Yeah. but we'll see. You never
We'll
know.
see.
I mean, potentially with the Nets and Harden, if he's there, not there, like I could see some scenarios where interesting stuff could happen. But good segue to Sixers Hawks.
That is a good segue, and I think it's a similar conversation in terms of the healthiness of a key player, which is Joel Embiid. I think is just the biggest question mark right here. So I try to like kind of factor that in. I was trying to see even like if there was news today if he's going to play in Game One, which I still haven't seen anything. So I kind of went back and forth here. Like I still think the Sixers are going to win this series, and I originally had them winning it in five, but then the more I thought about, okay, is Joel going to play game one? Even if he doesn't play game one and he comes back in game two or three, what kind of Joel Embiid are we getting here? Like he's clearly not going to be 100% with an injury like this. So I think that's going to make it more of a struggle, but I still think ultimately the Sixers are have enough to take the series. So I have Sixers in six.
So I like that prediction. I initially had Sixers in six. And I'm probably still, because I kind of underrated them in the first round. Probably overhyped the Knicks and all their regular season glory, but like the Sixers in five thing felt right at some point. And
Yeah,
I was like, the things that they do best, meaning the Hawks, like there's a specific person, and I don't think he'll be the person guarding him, at least initially. There's a specific person that can disrupt all of their whole game plan. Like if they for some reason find a way to decide to put Ben Simmons on Trae Young and he feels up for that test, like everything the Hawks do is like disrupted from there. So it'll be
absolutely.
interesting to see if that's a move they go to. They probably wouldn't go to it in game one.
Right.
I just think overall they're just better as a team. And then specifically, if there's like a 80% Joel,
Yep.
like Capella, sorry, like,
Yeah.
good defender, just too small, not skilled enough. So I feel like I'm underrating the Hawks a little bit just because they do have a lot of offensive weapons, but the Sixers the best thing they do is play defense. So
Yeah, that's exactly what my thought was. Like, because I was trying to think of the scenarios. So I'm like, okay, the Hawks, I think, will take at least one game with a big Trae Young game. Like we talk about this all the time. When there's a good enough star on one team, like they're good enough to not get swept in that they'll just have one game where they can just go off and like basically single-handedly win them the game. So I gave them that one. But then the second, like that I think that they can take advantage. Again, obviously a lot of it is on Embiid's health, is like how much the bigs can step up. You mentioned Capella, like he's been really solid in these playoffs. Like the numbers won't
yeah,
jump out to you, but he's just one of those big guys that, causes some trouble defensively and does the dirty work offensively, whether it's offensive rebounds or whatever. And with Joel either being out or not 100%, I think they need to take advantage of the Hawks need to take advantage of that by like having their
yeah,
bigs, whether it's Capella or Collins as well, who hasn't really like been crazy good this so far in the playoffs, but I think that he can step up as well. And then, yeah, like you said, I think the counter to that is the Sixers are very strong defensively, and I think they have a lot of different things they can do to disrupt Trae. Whether it's like you said, having Ben Simmons in their back pocket when they need to, but also like Thibault. You got some guys that are like
yeah.
capable of guarding the perimeter. Even like a Tobias Harris is, he's more of a forward or a wing, but you can put him on Trae, and I think that'll cause some trouble too. So I think there's a lot of switching that could happen that will like still be enough to kind of at least slow down Trae.
Yeah, and he's their motor.
Right.
I do keep thinking. I had a thought the other day when I was watching. I think it was game the last game that the Hawks won with Bogdanovich just like lighting up the net the Knicks. My
Yeah.
first thought was like, what if that had gone through and he was still in the box?
Yeah. Can you imagine? That'd be like
That
such a
insane
good
lineup.
yeah, that'd be such a good factor for them.
Yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned Bogdanovich because that's another part too that I think like he's an X factor in this series as well. If he could kind of continue to play the way he's been playing so far in the playoffs, that gives the Hawks at least a chance to take a couple games as well. But you're
yeah,
so right. Like we just talked about it too. The Bucks lost largely because they were not hitting threes at all, and Bogdanovich has been like lights out from behind the arc. So they
Like
definitely were
even if he's
missing it.
off the bench, you got that would be Drew, Bogdanovich, Middleton, Giannis, Lopez. Like what? So
It's a hell of a lineup.
that, neither here nor
They had
there.
to, they had to settle for Bryn Forbes, which is like Bryn Forbes had that amazing game in the first series, but you can't depend on Bryn Forbes to make like five threes a game.
He'll have one of those in another 8 games if they're still around. Like he's every 7, 8 games. Heat check guy.
All right, so yeah, I mean, again, no surprises really in the East. Well, I mean, obviously the Bucks Nets series we'll
Yeah.
see what happens there, but I think it's pretty set. The Sixers are going to move on. Well, we could pivot to the West, Ben. Um, Nuggets versus Suns. What you got?
So this was probably of all the series, and I guess to some degree the other like the either or series too, like trying to figure out like who would win. But the Suns Nuggets is the hardest series I feel like for me to predict.
Absolutely.
Um, First things first, I actually think home court's gonna matter. Like it doesn't seem to matter at all in the Mavericks Clipper series. It's completely bizarre.
Literally the opposite. Like
Yeah,
it's been historically, like people keep bringing it up. The road team has won every single game out of the six that have played, and that's never
yeah,
happened in a playoff series, which is like
yeah.
absurd.
And it could continue potentially like
Right,
for the last
right.
so insanity. But I think home court's actually gonna matter for one. Um, I think the Suns kind of came into their own a little bit um, against that Lakers series. They're going to come into the series with a lot of confidence. They don't have an answer for Jokic at all. There's nothing that they really
Nope.
like. Aiden will be Aiden. He'll be
He's gonna
fine,
get, yeah.
but like he's going to get destroyed.
He's gonna get cooked.
Like, um, but I don't think that Nuggets have an answer for Chris Paul. And kind of not for Devin Booker. Like they've got defenders that are decent. They've got Gordon. They've got guys that can probably bother Booker a little bit. But they don't have anybody that can really like do anything with Chris Paul. And Chris Paul makes all the other stuff work. So I got Suns in 7, which I feel like every time I pick a 7-game series, I'm like, how often do 7-game series actually happen? And it's not often, but I'm like, these teams feel like so tight competitively in terms of like what they bring to the table. And I think the Suns just have a little bit more like polish uh, than Portland. And the difference is like they don't have a guy that's gonna do Dame stuff. Booker can, depending on the night, but they don't. They didn't have a like Booker. Dame wasn't getting other guys involved the way that the Suns get, or that CP3 gets the rest of their guys involved. And I think that confidence is going to come in real handy. Like, hey, you just beat the defending champs without AD, but you beat the defending champs, so you can beat the team that the defending champs beat last year. So
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I think that this is definitely a pretty evenly matched series. I think it's interesting because the Suns have the momentum. It feel like they don't have anything to lose because it feels like they shouldn't have even been in this position in the first place. Like, we've talked about it. It's like Jamal going down, the immediate storyline was like, well, Nuggets are toast. Like they need him. And it's true, they do need him. But yeah, I ultimately went with Suns in 6. I think again a big question mark again is still like CP3 and what his health status is. It seemed like he may have re-aggravated that shoulder again. Interesting for me is like even when he was hurt, it seemed like he was finding ways to contribute. He was kind of back to what I was saying. Obviously, not to the same extent, but like realizing that he's not going to be the go-to person
yeah,
if he's not 100%, but finding ways to be like, all right, I'm going to distribute the ball, or I'm just going to be kind of like the hustle guy, or like whatever, knowing that I'm not going to be if my shoulder's aggravated, I'm not going to be like scoring at will and doing what I could normally do, but I'll still find ways to like get other guys going and control the pace and stuff like that. So his health is definitely a big question mark, but I think he'll kind of navigate through it the same way he did in the Lakers series. I think a key thing that sticks out to me for the Nuggets to be successful at all, obviously, the Joker's going to be the Joker. Like he's going to, like you said, there's not going to be much of a match for him, and he's gonna go off. I think what they need is their guards, which is so tough because like it's their like second string guards at this point.
Yeah,
Because
Campazzo, Monte Morris.
yeah,
Okay.
Monte Morris, Campazzo, Austin Rivers, but like in this first series, there were like Monte Morris had a really big game 5 and game 6. Like I think he scored 20 plus in both those games, and then Austin Rivers had that random game in like game 3 where like he just blew up in the fourth quarter and like basically won them the game. So like you can't depend on that, but I think that's going to be a key factor in terms of like them even being able to take at least 2 games. They need games like that again to happen, whether it's a Monte Morris, whether it's a Austin Rivers, and then PJ too. Like, we were talking about, I forget which game it was. It was 5 or 6, but he just like went crazy in the first half, and then he completely disappeared in the second half. It was like he had like almost 20 something, I think, in the first half, and we were both like, wow, dude, Michael Porter Jr. is insane. And then
Yeah.
like when I watched the second half, I think there was a stat pulled up and he like made 1 field goal in like the whole second half, and I was like, okay, that's not good. So that's another key factor is just like trying to find consistency from those other guys that aren't Jokic.
Yeah, that to me, like I think, I feel like he's this way in literally every series he's in. Like, and PJ's the X factor, like
Yeah.
in every series he's in, and it's just like, can he be the dude that everybody thought he was going to be coming out of Missouri before he was hurt?
Yep.
And if he lives up to that potential, like they get over whatever cliff it is, and then if not, maybe they wait another year till Jamal Murray comes back. So, but as far as I know, like roster wise, like the same group is going to be mostly together next year.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, and I think we talked about
Sans
before.
maybe Austin Rivers. Maybe they keep him, maybe they don't.
And I think we talked about this before too. Like the Aaron Gordon edition, I think was huge, and they didn't even have that until near the end of the season. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how they have their chemistry with him for a full season.
Yeah, it was really interesting watching him. Like other than that play that he got like cooked by Dame Lillard, like
Yep.
seeing Aaron Gordon like switching on to people,
Yeah,
like staying with whoever it was, and like that's a big deal.
he'll be doing that with Booker probably a
Yeah,
handful too. So it'll be interesting.
yeah. So that'll be probably other than like Bucks Nets, that might be the most interesting series in the next
I
round.
agree. I think it's pretty evenly matched up. All right,
And then
let's
there's
move
there's
on.
these other 2 series. So how do we want to cover this? Do we
I
want to do Game 7 prediction? Or
Yeah,
do
I
we want
think we
to do?
should start just kind of talking about like what we think is going to happen in Game 7, and then I think we can maybe just talk about both scenarios of like
Yeah,
even if your prediction is one way, like talk about the other side of it as well. It's like okay, if it's Clippers, if it's Mavericks. So um, Game 7, I'm still. I mean, I was texting about this too. I think the fact that the Clippers forced it to 7, it feels like it's their advantage now. It's like they have the momentum. I think if the Mavs were, they had to have done it in Game 6. Um, so yeah, I don't have much else to say. I just feel like they have the momentum. He kind of flipped the switch. It feels like in Game 6, and he's in his post game like he's very monotone and straightforward, but he's just like, I don't want to go home. He's like, I didn't want to go home, and I'm not going to go home. So it's like I think he's like got that mentality. Like it took him a little bit, but yeah, I think they're going to step up and they're going to close it out in Game 7 today.
I wanted to agree with that prediction, but I feel like all of my picks have been like what I want to see happen
Yep.
a little bit, and I'm like I think I just want to see in the long term. I actually would probably prefer to see the Clippers because they just make things more interesting. It's like, will
Totally.
Paul George and Kawhi collapse again? Like that whole thing just blows up if they lose
Totally.
today. But in a very, very strange way, because nobody expected them to win, because the Clippers like kind of tanked to get to play them in round one. Like
Yep.
I feel like even in a game 7, like all the pressure is on the Clippers in this game,
It is.
and pressure and Clippers does not equal good things. And I feel like every game that it's kind of been a little less pressure is the one that Lucas performed in. And it's so weird to say less pressure in a game 7, but I'm like, I feel like there's going to be less pressure on Luka and the Mavs today. If the Clippers start off cold, if they're missing shots, like the silence in that arena is going to get a little overwhelming real fast.
Totally.
So I'm going with Luka and the Mavs.
I like it.
I don't feel great about it. I'll say that, but I'm picking them to win.
No, I think to that point too, like Luka did not have a particularly great game last game. And, knowing great players, like it's all about the bounce back. And I think that'll be a true test to him. It's like, can he bounce back from that? Can he flip the switch and be like, okay, we had this we had this, like we should have won game 6. But Kawhi was too much. So now I think he's got to just step up to the challenge. And I think that he's one of those players that's going to be like stepping up to when the pressure's really on. It's going to be like, I think about this a lot too. His whole playoff career has been against the Clippers, like so far.
Yeah.
Because it was last season too. It was the same series. So it's like, it's now become a thing in his head. I think it's like, this is like a rivalry. It's definitely a rivalry now, I feel like, between last season and this season in the playoffs. So I think that's another piece that like almost makes it feel more personal, or it's like, this is the team I need to get over the hump in order to like prove that I'm a playoff performer. So I feel like he's kind of got that in the back of his mind, even if it's not like consciously, it's more of a subconscious thing. But think about that, like this is the only team I've been playing in the playoffs. I have to prove that I can get over this hump.
Picture perfect end of this series. Step back, look at 3 over Paul George.
Yes, right.
So perfect.
Think about that.
Like, all right, Clippers, you crushed the Clippers dynasty, got out of the first round, and now Luka's off to his illustrious career.
I hope it's just like the Dame 3 over Paul George. It's basically like just like that, but with Luka, and then it's like later Clippers, like first round, you're out.
Man. And then Kawhi can go to Portland and save everything. He's just like, all right, I'm out. This keeps happening to you, Paul George. Gotta get away from you. On that note, though, so there's 2 other options, or I guess one other option, technically, of what we could see, which would be if who would the Jazz beat, I guess, for this next round. So we've got either Jazz versus Clippers or Jazz versus Mavs. I feel like if it's the Mavs, I feel like I'm going to go with the Jazz in 6. And I think they don't have any answers for Gobert, especially with KP, who's just somebody made a joke the other day. It was like, I think it was KOC from The Ringer. He says, we're going to refer to this as the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade from now on because, what is KP doing? They don't have any answers for Gobert. They don't have any answers for Donovan Mitchell. And ultimately, it's like a one superstar versus 2. Gobert's not a superstar, but he has superstar impact against, especially teams that don't have anybody to really – they're going to be shooting a lot more step-back threes because they can't really get to the rim with Gobert. And that's one of the things that Luka does well. And so if he's able to distract that and they've just got to knock down threes, the Jazz have shown they're good at, they're the best team at shooting threes if we're going to go 3 for 3, but it's also going to be tough for them to defend them. So I'm gonna go Jazz over Mavs in 6, but I feel like if it's the Clippers, like matchup wise, it gets a little different. Um, Gobert's still an impact, but I think the Clippers like perimeter defenders, plus honestly the most important player on their team, in my opinion, other than Kawhi, being Rondo. Like I feel like he can like Donovan Mitchell is one of my favorite dudes in the league. He's got a lot of fire, but if there's a dude that can get under anybody's skin and like mess their head a little bit, it's usually Rondo. And I feel like if they get over that hurdle, they might have a little bit of swagger, and they'll have guys to throw at Mitchell. Like Beverly can get back off the bench, and they'll have like some options to throw at the Jazz. So I got Clippers over Jazz in 7. I'm gonna reserve the right to change that prediction at some point because I feel like we have underrated the Jazz a little bit, and they probably have heard that. So
I that's a good segue because I have now decided we're definitely underrating the Jazz. Not just a little bit, I think a lot of it. I think like okay, I looked this up just to like get a sense of their stats. Like in the regular season, again, that's the big asterisk, is in the regular season, but they were the number 4 offensive rating and they were the number 3 defensive rating, and they were the only team in the regular season that was in top 5 for on both ends. Like that's saying a lot. Like so not only are they elite offensively, they're elite defensively. That's huge to just have that all around game. And like we've talked about before, maybe it's a benefit not putting all the onus on like one person's shoulders.
mm-hmm.
That is that their guy, and I think that was kind of proven in game 1 when he didn't play against the Grizzlies, and they lost, and then after he came back, they're just like flipped the switch and we're like, all right, we got to take care of business, and he was all about it. I think he's like just getting his groove back because he missed a lot of time before that, even like before coming back for the Grizzlies series. So I think we're gonna see him kind of channel what he did last season in the bubble playoffs. I think he's gonna be on another level. Winning either scenario. I have them beating the Mavs in 5. I have them beating the Clippers. I do agree with some of what you're saying. Like with the Clippers matchup, I think that'll definitely be tougher. I think they're going to have weapons to throw at Donovan to slow him down at least a little bit. But I still think ultimately they have enough depth to get some of the other guys to step up and kind of counter, even if Donovan's not having a great game.
Yeah, it's easy to forget. I feel like sometimes how deep the Jazz are too. Like, oh, they've got Bogdanovich back, and they have Ingles, and they've got Clarkson.
Right. They've got two guys that were finalists for 6th man of the year. So you've got the 6th and 7th man of the year, basically.
Yeah. So it can get easy to forget that because like at the end of the game, like when it's closing time, like sometimes they're not really the focal point anymore. But you're gonna need those minutes too during the year, or during the game. So
I think if it's Clippers, and we weirdly saw this in the last game, Clippers versus or no, sorry, I'm mixing my teams up. The Mavs. We saw the Mavs roll out more Boban in the last game. I feel like if it's Mavs Jazz, and not that it's going to be a direct counter to Gobert, but like to try to match that size, because you're definitely, like you said, not going to have KP down low. Like you're going to want to have some kind of size. They're probably going to try to do a little more Boban just to see how that works out. But yeah, it'll be
that'll be like comical just to look at on the floor.
Boban and Gobert, yeah.
It's so funny. Like KP is what 7'1" as well. But when I see him out there, because he's like floating around the 3-point line half the time,
right?
Like it doesn't feel like anything is happening. Like there's no intimidation factor of KP being down on the block. I'm like, yeah, go to the hall. KP's down there.
Very true. I was noticing in the last game though, he didn't really do shit offensively, but he was actually doing pretty well defensively, just in terms of like being long and like clogging up some space in the paint. So like again, I'm not trying to be a KP defender because he's clearly not been the player that everyone thought he was going to be. But I was like, if you're really paying close attention, there's still some little things that he's at least contributing. He's got to be
Yeah.
much more than that, but at least it's not like he was a complete negative on both ends. It was like he was doing something. Like there was a
Yeah.
reason why he was
He
out
has
there.
moments. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I feel like whenever he's actually hitting threes, it's like, okay, we'll keep you there. Like you can stretch the floor and then you can kind of defend the rim.
yeah. That was another thing too. Again, not to like keep talking about the Mavs Clippers, but I guess that's important because it's like that's what this we don't know what the scenario is going to be. But going back to that game 6, it's like I felt like Luca wasn't really on in terms of his shot going down, which he kind of went into that LeBron mode where it was like I'm going to get everyone else going. And then he was getting everyone pretty good looks that just they were not going down, which has to be frustrating, when you're
Yeah.
Luca. But like that's again, we talk about it all the time. Like that's the key is like what can the other guys do? Like if Luka's not going to be taking over the game, which is what happened in game 6, it's like you just need other people to just hit at least a couple of like open three. Like he's gonna find a way to get you the ball, get you open and all that because he just draws so much attention himself that it's like that's going to be the key. Is like you need the Tim Hardaway Juniors, the KPs to like hit these open. Jalen Brunson, who has been like I always talk about how like it's crazy Jalen
Yeah.
Brunson is like their second best player, but like he is their second best player and he's been their second best player in these games too. So they need him to just stay consistent and do what he does. I think he helps when he's on the court with Luca too because it takes a little bit of pressure. Like there's still a guy that can get a shot, and like also facilitate if he needs to too. So it'll be. I'm very very excited for this game 7. I'm not gonna lie because we didn't get like we made our predictions whenever there's a close matchup that there's gonna be game 7, and you made the point too. Like there's not that many game 7s, and literally in the first round, this is the only game 7. So it's
Yeah.
pretty
Like
exciting.
it's always fun to call them, but it's like, yeah, it doesn't always work out that way.
Doesn't
So
always work out that way, but this is the one, and it's crazy too because we already had a second round game. Wow, yeah, there's another one, Dave, and we're still stuck in the first round in today's game. So
yeah,
it's just
like
an
wrap
interesting.
this up, Luca.
Yeah,
Get it done.
let's get it done.
Yeah.